The Reckoning of Officer Jensen Cole. The police lights painted the back of a black Cadillac Escalade in strobing flashes of red and blue. Officer Jensen Cole killed the siren, the sudden silence of Willow Creek Boulevard feeling heavy and expectant. Look at this guy, he thought, a familiar sneer twisting his lips. Cadillac designer suit, thinks he owns the world. Cole had seen 1,000 times, and he always loved knocking the crown off their heads. He kicked his door open, letting it swing wide. His walk was a practiced roll of the shoulders, a swagger meant to intimidate. As he approached the driver's side, his knuckles deliberately brushed the grip of his sidearm. The judgment was already passed. The sentence was already decided. The tinted window slid down with a near-silent hum. Behind the wheel sat a black man whose composure was a suit of armor. His hands were loose on the steering wheel, his gaze in the rear-view mirror perfectly steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man asked, his voice a low, smooth baritone. Cole leaned down, invading his space. He ignored the question. "You changed lanes back there without a signal. Let me see your license and registration now." He rapped his knuckles on the window frame, a sharp, demanding sound. The driver's eyes met his. "I'm quite certain I signaled, officer." The politeness was a weapon. It was calm, precise, and it set Cole's teeth on edge. Without another word, the man reached into the glove compartment with a slow, deliberate motion and produced the documents. Cole snatched them from his hand. He read the name on the license, intentionally butchering the pronunciation. Julian Thorne. He let out a short, condescending laugh. "What's a man like you doing all the way out here on Willow Creek?" "I'm on my way to work," Thorne replied, his expression unreadable. "Right. And what kind of work would that be?" Cole pressed, his tone thick with insinuation. Julian Thorne's eyes were like polished stone. "I ensure that men in positions of power use that power correctly." That was it. The calm, the confidence, the veiled challenge. It was a direct assault on Cole's authority. A hot, familiar rage surged in his chest. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Cole's voice was a low growl. "It means I'm good at my job," Thorne answered, his voice never rising. Cole leaned in closer, his face inches from the open window. "It's always a game with you people, isn't it? You think you're above the rules." Thorne's eyes narrowed, the first crack in his placid facade. "You people?" he asked. "Officer, be very specific. Who are you referring to?" Cole smirked, looking away as he pulled out his notepad. "You know exactly who I'm referring to." A heavy silence fell between them. "Officer Cole," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that cut to the air like a razor. "Let me offer you some professional courtesy. The next action you take will have permanent consequences. Choose wisely." Cole froze. The words weren't a plea. They were a verdict. This wasn't some scared citizen. This was a man who knew the system, who knew the pressure points. A wave of wounded pride washed over him. He wasn't going to be intimidated. Not by this guy. He stomped back to his cruiser, his boots cracking against the asphalt. This was about more than a ticket now. This was about putting this man back in his place. He sat in the driver's seat, the citation form glowing on his screen, but a simple ticket felt like a surrender. He opened a new incident report, his fingers flying across the keyboard, fabricating a narrative. Subject displayed extreme hostility, engaged in verbal intimidation of a peace officer, willfully obstructed the stop. The charges were thin, but it would be his word against Thorne's. And in this town, Cole knew whose word mattered. He strode back to the Cadillac and shoved the citation to the window with a triumphant sneer. "This could have been a warning," he said, "but your attitude bought you a court date." Julian Thorne took the paper, his movement still infuriatingly calm. "My attitude didn't write this ticket, officer. Your prejudice did." Cole's sneer widened into a grin. "You're going to need a team of lawyers for what comes next, pal." Thorne neatly folded the citation in half. His voice, when he spoke, was chillingly devoid of emotion. "No, I won't. But you should understand something. You think this is a traffic stop? It's not. It's an audit. And you've just failed." The window glided shut, sealing him away. Cole was left standing on the pavement, the echo of those words ringing in his ears. For a split second, A cold dread trickled down his spine. He'd kicked a hornet's nest, but then the rage returned hotter than before. That night, he sat at his kitchen table. The incident report still not feeling like enough. He was going to ruin this guy. He pulled up a new document and began drafting a civil complaint, pounding the keys with savage satisfaction. Severe emotional distress, psychological injury. He would humiliate Thorne. He would make an example of him. He would grind him into the dust. His phone buzzed. It was his old academy partner, Rick Miller. "Are you out of your mind, Jensen?" Rick said, skipping the pleasantries. "You're actually suing a guy over a traffic stop?" "You weren't there," Cole shot back. This guy was a professional agitator, asking for it. "And what's the charge?" "Felony hurting an officer's feelings." Rick's voice turned serious. "Listen, the department cuts guys like you loose when a lawsuit hits. This is a mistake." "It's already filed," Cole said flatly and hung up. The next day at the precinct, he put on a show. "You should have seen this guy," he laughed to his colleagues, acting like he was a damn attorney general. Officer Dan Calloway listened from a corner. "Be careful, Jensen," he warned quietly. "That Thorne guy, that name sounds familiar. He's not who you think." Cole just scoffed. Meanwhile, Julian Thorne calmly read the lawsuit notification. His brother, Leo, was frantic. "A civil suit? This is a declaration of war. We have to get ahead of it. Leak it to the press." Julian shook his head, his eyes hard as steel. "No, we let him." "Let him? Why?" "Because arrogance is a blindfold, Leo," Julian said, his voice cold with conviction. "Men like Cole get so focused on their own rage, they never see the trap they're walking into. He's running a tired, predictable playbook. Let him." On the day of a hearing, Officer Cole walked into the courthouse like he owned it. He saw Julian Thorne sitting alone, no lawyer in sight, and grinned. This is going to be beautiful, he thought. He leaned over to his own attorney, speaking loudly enough for the gallery to hear. "Watch this. A masterclass in what happens when you mouth off to a cop." Judge Alastair Finch entered, his face a granite slab of impatience. He peered at the defendant. "Mr. Thorne, you are representing yourself. I trust you understand that this is a court of law, not a stage for protest." Julian Thorne simply nodded once. He wasn't offensive. He was a predator waiting. From a back row, a man in a dark suit, Agent Keller, watched, his focus absolute. Cole noticed him, feeling a brief, unwelcome chill. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, "do you have an opening response?" Julian stood, his motion fluid and economical. "Your Honor," he began, his voice cutting through the room, clear and steady. "I will not waste this court's time. I will speak only when it is essential." The words hung in the air. This wasn't the rambling of a nervous citizen. This was the calm precision of a professional. The bailiff shifted his weight. A reporter in the front row suddenly sat up straighter. Cole felt a flicker of doubt. He rehearsed that, he told himself, but the thought had no conviction. The power in the room was beginning to shift, and for the first time, he felt like he was on the wrong side of it. As the hearing concluded, Cole couldn't resist one last jab. He brushed past Thorne in the aisle. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," he hissed, "but this is my town. I am the system here." Julian Thorne turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto Cole's. "A man who is the system," he replied, his voice low and steady, "should know that the most dangerous person in the room is always the one who watches and waits." With that, he walked away. From the back row, Agent Keller stood and followed. As he passed the court clerk, he let his jacket fall open just enough to reveal the glint of a federal badge. The clerk's eyes went wide. The trap was set. By the second hearing, the atmosphere had changed. Cole's swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. Julian Thorne arrived as before, alone and composed, but this time he carried a thick folder. When called upon, he stood and opened it. "Your Honor," he began, "pursuant to the Law Enforcement Integrity Act, Title IX, Section 22, an officer acting without probable cause is liable for civil rights violations." Cole's lawyer went pale, frantically searching his tablet. Thorne wasn't done. He placed the document on the evidence table. This is the ruling from Commonwealth versus Miller 2017, which affirms a citizen's right to question a stop, especially when the officer has a disciplinary history. He then laid down another paper. Which brings us to a 2019 complaint against Officer Cole by Mr. Chun, a complaint for unlawful detainment that was quietly settled out of court. Objection! Cole screamed, his voice cracking as he shot to his feet. That's irrelevant. Judge Finch silenced him with a glare. It speaks to a pattern of behavior, officer. He turned to Thorne. And how did you obtain these records? Julian held the judge's gaze. I did my homework. A terrifying thought began to dawn on Cole as he watched the exchange. He wasn't looking at a defendant. He was looking at a hunter who had just cornered his prey. The final hearing was a formality. The press row was half empty. The smart reporters already knew how the story would end. Julian Thorne walked in carrying only a single thin envelope. He stood and looked directly at Jensen Cole. Your Honor, the plaintiff's entire case rests on the perception of his character. I would now like to introduce a document that speaks to the reality of it. Objection! Cole's lawyer yelped, a futile gesture. Thorne continued unfazed. This is a verified internal affairs report from Sterling County dated 8 years ago. It details Officer Cole's use of excessive force and racially charged language during an arrest. He paused, letting the words settle in the dead, silent room. The complaint was dismissed because the reviewing federal agent chose to give a young officer a second chance. He then locked his eyes on Cole, and his voice turned to ice. I now realize, Julian Thorne said with cold, profound regret, that I made a mistake. The blood drained from Cole's face. He stared at Thorne, seeing a ghost from a past he thought was buried and forgotten. The judge leaned forward, his own shock visible. Mr. Thorne, are you telling this court that you were the federal agent who reviewed that case? Yes, Your Honor, Julian replied, turning to the bench. Special Agent Julian Thorne, Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. A pen clattered to the floor. It was the only sound in the stunned courtroom. It's a setup. He came after me. Cole shrieked, his composure finally shattering into 1,000 pieces. Julian looked at him, not with anger, but with a deep and weary disappointment. This was never personal. Officer Cole, this is accountability. It has been waiting for you all along. As Cole's lawyer slumped in his chair, a woman stood up from the gallery. It was Cole's wife, Claire. She walked down the aisle, her face a mask of stone, and stopped at his table. I asked you, Jensen, she said, her voice brittle and dead. All those times I asked if there was something you were hiding. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw not love, but pure disgust in her eyes. I see it now. I wasn't missing the signs. I was just ignoring them. She turned and walked out of the courtroom and out of his life. The real ending never made the news. It came 2 days later in a cold, quiet office back at the precinct. Cole sat across from his captain, a man whose face was carved from granite and contempt. The DOJ is ready to indict you, Jensen, the captain said, his voice flat and hard. Perjury, civil rights violations. You're looking at serious prison time. He slid a single piece of paper across the desk. Or you sign this full resignation, effective immediately. You forfeit your entire pension. You walk out of here today, and this all goes away. It's the only deal you're getting. Cole stared at the paper, his hands trembling. His whole world had been reduced to this single damning page. Your badge, the captain ordered, his voice like ice. And your weapon. Put them on the table. Now! With fumbling, shaking fingers, Cole unclipped the badge from his belt. It landed on the polished wood with a cheap, tiny clatter. He unholstered his service weapon and laid it beside the badge. Then he picked up the pen and signed his career, his identity, and his future away. The captain snatched the paper. You have 20 minutes to clean out your locker, he said, turning his back on him in a final act of dismissal. Then I never want to see your face in this building again. The true justice wasn't in a verdict. It was in the sight of Jensen Cole pushing through the precinct's glass doors for the last time. No uniform, no badge, no swagger. Just a broken man in street clothes disappearing into the anonymous afternoon crowd, utterly and finally erased.